Welcome back from an ad break. As mentioned, we are talking about the impact of recent legislation, and for today we'll be focusing on the BCA and the COIDA. And as mentioned, again, we said for every legislation we need to start with the purpose, meaning you need to understand why should we have this legislation. What is the whole purpose of this legislation? What is the role? What is the function of this legislation? So now we're starting off with the BCA, the Basic Conditions of Employment Act. So what is the purpose of this legislation? It provides, as you can see here, it provides clear terms and conditions, the terms and conditions of employment for employers and employees, for both, basically, the employers and employees. So there are terms and conditions to say, as we are employing you, we are employing you under these conditions. Right. The second thing, it sets minimum standards or minimum requirements or standards for the employment contract. So definitely after being employed, there's going to be a contract that you're going to sign. And that contract should be influenced basically or by your BCA, by this legislation. So the employer cannot draft a contract without complying with the BCEA basically. Right, it says it advances economic development and social justice, ensuring fairness. And then we're going to do our impacts now. Now, don't forget, with the impacts, we're speaking of the positives and the negatives. So what are the positives and the negatives of the basic conditions? Right. So the basic conditions, the positives or the advantages, it creates a framework of acceptable employment practices. For example, if you're going to employ you, we are employing you for how long? What time are you going to start? What time are you going to finish? When is your leave days? Should you fall pregnant? How many months of leave are you getting? So this one, it creates, that is why they say it creates a framework of acceptable employment practices. So we're talking work hours. Are you going to work 24/7 here, or are you going to work for 3 hours or 7 hours? So all of that, we get it way in our BCEA. So at least once you understand the working hours and the employment practices, it makes your work to be easier. And actually not only the employer, but both the employer and the employee. So it also outlines the minimum requirements that form the basis of employment contracts, basically the foundation of the employment contract. Remember, you cannot start working without getting a contract, and you need to sign. Both of you, the employer and the employee, needs to agree on the terms and conditions of the contract, meaning as the employer, I cannot unilaterally make any changes without informing you as the employee. So whatever changes that I'm going to make, I need to ensure that I inform you. So with the BCA, it outlines the minimum requirements that form the foundation or the basis of the employment contracts. All right, so now let's go to the negatives of the Basic Conditions of Employment Act. It says here, no employer may force, very important, no employer may force an employee to work more than 45 hours in a week. This may result in reduced productivity. What does that mean? So if you're going to work for more than 45 hours a week, you're going to be tired. There's also fatigue and all that. And so if you are tired, it has an impact on productivity. And that's not what we want. Remember, if it has an impact on productivity, it means it will also affect our sales in the long run. So we are being guided by the BCA basically to say, as employees, you're supposed to work 45 hours and not more than that. However, it will state that if you're going to work for more than 45 hours, that should be overtime, and you need to be paid for that overtime. But also, there's a limitation with regards to that overtime. But for now, we know that our standard hours, it's what? It's 45 hours in a week. So it depends now whether you're going to work 5 days, or if it's not 5 days, it's going to be maybe 6 days. But let's hear. Businesses may regard employment contracts negatively and may not implement it to put into action, which results in non-compliance and penalties. Remember, this is a negative thing. We do not want penalties, because penalties, it's like a punishment. So we don't want that. So now, what are the penalties of non-compliance? If we do not comply, we don't do as legislated as we're supposed to. So businesses that do not comply with the BCA may receive a compliance order. Remember now, this is from a court maybe. It says here, labor inspectors may investigate, inspect, or ask questions about complaints and remove records as evidence. Businesses may be taken to the labor court for a ruling. So now this might even have what? A negative publicity. Negative publicity. And if there's negative publicity, right, who would want to be associated with our business that does not comply? Nobody wants to be associated with that. So now we even see investors pulling out of the business. We see now customers not supporting us. So we don't want that. So how then should we comply? We want to run away or avoid being taken to the courts. We want to avoid your negative publicity. What must we do? It says here, workers should only work 9 hours per day in a 5-day work week or 8 hours in a 6-work week. I hope you see now, because when you multiply that 9 by 5, you get 45. 8 by 6, you get 45 hours. You should remember we're told that that's what we need to do as a business. Right, workers can take up to 6 weeks of paid sick leave during a 36-month cycle. Now, 36-month cycle is basically what? Your 3 years. It's 3 years. So in 3 years, workers can take up to 6 weeks of paid, so that employees are not exploited. They need to be paid. So this is within their rights. Very, very important. Workers must be paid double if they work during public holidays. Now, we know our public holidays. We know we've got your Christmas Day, we've got your June 16, whatever holidays that you can think of. Whatever holidays that you can think of that is in the calendar. So if you're going to work on that holiday, and then you should be paid double for that. If you were getting 100 Rand on that day, but if it's a double, on a normal day, you're getting 100 Rand. But if you're going to work on a public holidays, it's no longer going to be 100, but it's going to be 200. So that is what double means, depending on your rating, obviously. Now we're going to look at the provisions of the BCA. Remember, I did say that this is the only legislation that has got provisions. The other legislations do not have provisions. Right, let's start with the provisions of the BCA. The first one is the regulation of the work time. We just spoke about work time, 45 hours, but we'll expand on it. Then there's leave. We spoke briefly about leave as well, but we're going to expand on it. Termination. To terminate is to end. Don't forget, to end of employment. And then the prohibition of employment of children and forced labor. We're going to speak about that. So with the regulation of working time, what does it say? According to the BCA, it says we've got ordinary hours of work. There's ordinary hours of work. There's overtime. And what else? Meals, breaks, and rest periods. And we've got public holidays. This is now the regulation of work time. Let's start with ordinary hours of work. Workers may not work for more than 45 hours. We spoke about 45 hours in a week. And then we did say that workers may work 9 hours a day if they work 5 days or less per week. It can be 8 hours if they work 6 days. Workers may work 8 hours a day if they work more than 5 days a week. I just explained that as well. Then with regards to overtime, workers must agree to work overtime. The employer cannot tell you now in the 11th hour that you'll be working for overtime, but it has to be by agreement. Both the employer and employee must agree on that. Right, workers cannot work more than 3 hours of overtime per day or 10 hours per week. Remember, I did say that even with overtime, there is a limitation. So this is a limitation of overtime that I said, that I spoke about, the limitation of overtime, to say in as much as you're going to work for overtime, however, 3 hours per day and 10 hours per week. That's how it is. Why? Because if you're going to work more than that, it's going to hamper on what? On productivity. And we did say that with productivity, you end up not doing justice to the work. And we don't want that. We want to keep the standard. Quality is of paramount importance in the business. Right, the second provision is meal breaks and rest periods. I mean, everybody wants to rest when you're working. You have to go on for breaks, tea break, lunch, and all that. So it says here, workers must have a meal of 60 minutes after 5 continuous hours of work. So at least after 5 continuous hours of work, then you need to get 60 minutes. It's very important that you master these times. Very important. You can't just say 30 minutes after. It's not 30 minutes, it's 60 minutes, or you can simply say an hour after continuous 5 hours of work. This can be reduced to 30 minutes, but by written agreement. This takes us back to what I said to say, as an employer, I cannot make any changes alone. So it needs to be in a written agreement when working less than 6 hours per day. Right, and then you go to the public holidays. Workers must be paid for working on any public holiday that falls on a working day. Very important. I spoke about public holidays just now. Work on public holidays is by agreement and paid double the rate. So if the rate is 120 on a normal basis, so what's going to happen? On a public day, on a public holiday, we're going to say 120 times what? Times 2, meaning public holiday is how much? What is 120 times 2? It's 240, meaning double holiday. I mean, on a holiday, public holiday, then you're getting 240. Yeah, that's your rating. Then we go to the types of leaves. Right, with type of leave, we've got your annual leave. Remember, annual means what? Yearly. Don't forget that. Right. Yearly, and then you've got sick leave, because we never know what can happen. You can fall ill tomorrow, and what? Are you required to go to work? You can't work, because also if you're sick, and then it's going to have an impact on productivity. And then maternity leave as well, family responsibility leave, and parental leave. Right, now let's go through the annual leave. Right, workers are entitled, but let me pause for now. Let's go back to the types of leave. So we've got annual leave, we've got sick leave, we've got maternity leave, family responsibility, and we've got parental leave. These are the types of leave that we have. So these are 5. Right, so the provision, you can't say the provision is the last one that we just did now. You say it's hours of work, and then it's sick leave, and then it's annual leave. No, all of these, they fall under one thing, which is types of leave. Types of leave is a provision. I hope I am clear. Right, with the annual leave, workers are entitled to 21 consecutive days of annual leave per year. What does consecutive mean? They follow each other. Workers are entitled to 21 consecutive days. You can take your 21 consecutive days like that, following each other like that up until here. So you're entitled to that. 1 day for every 17 days worked, 1 day for every 17 days worked. And then we've got sick leave as a type of leave. Employees are entitled to 30 days of sick leave, of paid, very important, paid sick leave in 3 years, very important. A medical certificate may be required before paying an employee who is absent for more than 2 consecutive days. So you can be absent for less than 2 days without producing anything, but should you be absent on the 3rd day, then a medical certificate may be required to ensure that you are not just sitting and not doing anything at home. Then we've got maternity leave. So a pregnant employee is entitled to 4 consecutive months leave. Consecutive, it's important. It can be this month and then you skip the month and then you go on the next month. No, consecutive, it follows each other like that. So 4 consecutive months leave, you are entitled to it. A pregnant employee may not be allowed to perform work that is hazardous to her unborn child. Hazardous could mean what? Work that maybe is dangerous or harmful maybe. So that is what hazardous means. Right, and then we've got family responsibility leave, 3 to 5 days paid leave per year on request in the event of maybe death of the employee's life partner, very important, life partner, parent, or grandparent. So you can't say that it's your cousins. No, family responsibility speaks of the life partner, the parent, or grandparent. So can you see that limitation there? That is a family responsibility leave. An employer may require reasonable proof before granting this leave. We want to see things like maybe surnames. Are they the same, or how related are you? We want to see that. Then we've got parental leave. An employee who's a parent is entitled to 10 consecutive days parental leave after the birth of his or her child, irrespective of the gender. So normally here it could be a father maybe going on parental leave or taking a parental leave for 10 days. And then the employer must be informed at least 1 month before the expected due date of birth. You can't tell the employer today that tomorrow you're going on parental leave. No, the employer must know, must be informed prior to that date. Right, and then now when you are ending an employment, so that is termination of employment. A contract of employment may only be terminated following 1 week's notice if the worker has been employed for 6 months or less. So if you've been employed for 6 months, and then you can only render a week's notice if it's only 6 months or less. But if it's more than that, a minimum of 4 weeks notice must be given if the worker has been employed for a year or longer. So with 4 weeks, it means what? It means a month if you've worked for longer than that. Right, the employee must be given notice in writing. Very important, because this would be like your termination of employment resignation letter. Right, and then we've got the last provision, which is child labor, or prohibition, which is child labor. Right, what does that mean? It is illegal to employ a child that is younger than 15 years of age. Why? As at the age of 15 years, you're expected to still be in school. So employing a child that is younger than 15 years would be regarded as child labor. It is also illegal to force somebody to work. Businesses may employ children over the age of 15 years if employment is not harmful to their health and education. Like I said, minors under the age of 18 years of age may not do any hazardous work or any dangerous work, if you may call it that way. All right, so we've come to an end of the BCEA. We're going to go on a quick break so that we go and drink water. But when we come back, we'll come back energized, and then we continue with our lesson. I'll see you just now.